Thank you for coming today. I'm going to be your moderator. My name is Terry Roskovich. I'm the Governance and Education Administrator at ORCA. So the session today is Onboarding a New Manager, Part 2, Leading Your Team. But before we get started, I just want to go through some quick housekeeping tips regarding the GoToWebinar. So as you can see, to open and close your control panel, select the orange box with the arrow on your screen, which is pictured. The control panel automatically minimizes when not in use, so you are able to view the entire presentation without the obstruction of the control panel. So it's important to remember that if you are calling in using your telephone, please remember to mute your mic and speakers on your computer. If you do not, the webinar audio will be distorted with feedback, and if you're listening on your computer, you don't need to call in. Now, in the handout section, you will find a printable copy of this presentation and a copy of the webinar evaluation form. Once the webinar has concluded, please complete the webinar and send it back to ORCA as stated on the evaluation form. Also attached, Now, the next is if you have questions throughout the webinar, please use the questions panel. We will be conducting a question period at the end of the webinar where our presenter will answer questions submitted through the question box, or if you raise your hand, we will unmute your line and you can speak your question. All right, so thank you very much, and I'll pass it over to the presenter, Lori Flasco.
Thank you, Terry. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back to Leading Your Team, two-part series for being a brand new manager. In our first session, we talked about the characteristics of a highly successful leader, moving from peer to leader, and covered some pitfalls and things to remember and put into place immediately to build your confidence. And today we're going to spend time talking about leading your team. As a manager, you're a team leader and a team player, and your role is to ensure that the team is performing and meeting the larger goals set by the organization. So today we're going to talk about some things that can set you up for success. For those of you that I met the last time, again, welcome back. And those of you that I haven't, just a little bit of information about my background. I have been working with organizations for the last 15 years with leaders, managers, frontline staff, and really helping them create their customer experience. And through training, through coaching, through team building, and have really enjoyed my time with ORCA and members, and again as a consultant, trainer, and coach. So it's great to have you all today, and look forward to working with you. You might remember from the last time, one of the tips that we talked about was how important it is to set a tone in your meetings. And I want to do just a little bit of an exercise around that, and just open up the chat lines for a moment. And I'd like you to talk about, or to think about, and drop in some ideas about what is awesome. What is awesome right now? Again, I'm going to be looking in the chat lines, and so when I think what is awesome, we've got 1 minute where I'd love to hear things that are going on in your world. Things maybe some of you are a new grandma or new grandpa, or you might have a new baby yourself. Something awesome about your residence. Perhaps it might be an event that you've just had. Perhaps a shout out to your team. So again, looking in the chat room, we'd love to hear if there's something that's awesome going on in your world. And I'll just, as we're looking, I'll just share with you my awesome day. Is one of the things that brings me anxiety is technology. So to be able to have Terry sitting right next to me is awesome. So we'd love to be able to hear that. Oh, we've got a couple this weekend. We're having an awesome grape stomping event. Does that sound like fun? Daughter started university. Wow. So you get a whole new world, maybe with no shoes at the front door. That's what I thought, but that's so exciting, Julie. I'm sure lots and lots. Any other awesome things that are happening here? Love to hear from some of you. And you can even read each other's comments as we go on. as I ask you to do this, here's something, again, to think about with your team. Make this something that people get used to, because the first time they might not know what to say. And if you can go around the room and kind of find out, you've got a minute of silence or a minute of awesomeness, and each time you do this, it'll build and it'll grow. One thing that we know is a lot of times we need to set the tone of our meetings and of our workday, and we know that when we start in a positive tone, it helps us, really concentrate on the customer experience, concentrate on our residents. Is there another one here? We've got new managers on the team. So again, awesome and great. Welcome and congratulations to the new managers, because new managers bring new energy and new ideas. So I think that's awesome. This idea came from a woman named Barbara Glantz, and she wrote the book Care Packages for the Workplace, and again talks about just take 2 minutes either in your meeting at the beginning of a shift, and it really puts people in a good mood and a good way to start their day. So here's our agenda. Actually, before our agenda, here's a focus question that I have for you. I'd like you to think about how will you create an environment where your team will be excited about working at your retirement home. So as we go through the session today and the next hour, think what are some things that you can put into place that will really help you with that question and help you think about it. Because, if you think about this, if your team is excited and happy and engaged, how will they be at performing their duties? Will it be different? And for you, the role that you'll play in that also. So we're going to talk and spend some time about building a strong team. There's a great book, and I'll share more information. It's called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and we'll share what those dysfunctions are and how it can impact your results. And one of the key ways and a foundational piece is how to build trust in your team. And then we'll look at the whole entire cycle and tips and strategies and techniques. And what I'd like to remind you of is if there's anything that we go through, because we're going to be covering this fast, and I've got quite a few tips that I've included. If they don't make sense or you have a question, please feel free to email me directly or even give me a quick telephone call. My email and my phone number is listed at the back, so that will be helpful to you. I love this quote. No one can whistle a symphony. It takes an orchestra to play it. I don't know about some of you. I remember my high school band, and a couple of my friends were playing the trumpet and some different instruments, and I thought, oh my goodness. Yet with practice and with time, they sounded absolutely amazing. And if you think about that conductor, that person that's standing there getting everyone to play in sync, and when everyone is trained and learns how to do and how to play their instrument together, just how beautiful that is. And really that's your role as the conductor and having everyone play, and what a beautiful symphony it is. So I'd like to start out with this question to you about thinking about the best team you've ever worked with. And again, I'm going to ask that you go into the chat line and tell us what made that team successful. So again, the best team you've ever worked with and what made that team successful. And while we're looking for some of your answers here, I'm going to share with you, I remember we've got one here, transparency and knowledge. Excellent. So keep those going. Thank you, Charlene. When I was first starting out as a young woman, I worked in a restaurant. I'll never forget, everything I learned about customer service was from a woman named Olga, who taught me how to work hard, but also how to have fun. And I remember some of the best teams that I've ever had were teams where we had fun. So I'm looking at the chat line and I see great leadership. Absolutely. The role of the leader is essential, which is what we'll be talking about today. Recognizing team members and acknowledging their successes. Thank you, Julie. Competency, collaboration, and excellent communication between each other. Darlene, that's so important. And, between the team members and then also the larger team also, isn't it? So great ideas. I want to share with you a few other things. When I went out and I surveyed some of the the managers, the seasoned managers, I asked them for some advice for new managers in building their team. And here's a few of their responses. They talked about respect, understanding goals and sharing them with your team, training, understanding who your customers are, having daily reviews with your team. What do you need to be supported? Getting to know your teammates, empowering them, that positive feedback again, celebrating successes, even socializing after hours. And one team member just put an asterisk, many asterisks, besides how important it is to build trust. A few more things that came up. We're helping each other, sometimes working outside your scope to get the job done. Isn't that so right, Charlene? We're going to talk about that, rolling up your sleeves. Trudy, the team I have now, respectful from upper management, make a huge difference. It funnels down to the frontline workers. And Trudy, I think that's so important. No matter what your role is, it really does start from the top, and you have an influence on that. So great ideas and great information as we start. I'd like you to introduce to you something called the loyalty profit chain, or you might have heard of it by the service profit chain. And this came out of Harvard, and it goes way back into the 90s, but it's resurfacing, and it's got such good information. There's a book called How Leading Companies Link Profit and Growth to Loyalty. And so, you know, if you look at this, organizations, if you start at number 9, their goal is revenue growth and profit. That's why they're in business. And they often work backwards. So they focus on that growth and the profit. But really what we want to do, and what Harvard suggests, is you turn this upside down, and instead of focusing in on growth and profit, you focus on number 1, which is your internal service and your quality. And when you focus on getting things right with your team and recognizing, as we talked about the last time, your own staff as being your most important assets, and the way that you treat them, when you get and you hire amazing staff, then they're satisfied, and you've got the cream of the crop working for you in a great work environment. And those are the ones that you want to retain, and they're going to stay with you because of the work environment and the way that they're treated. And when you've got great employees, they're going to be productive and perform at high potential as well. And those employees will provide great quality service, and then your customers are satisfied, and from there you've got superior customer value, and that's when you have customer loyalty, and in the end is growth and profit. So your frontline employees are critical to great customer service, and in this chain it translates to empowering them to do their jobs well and increasing their motivation to give great customer service. And we know that when a customer rates us as excellent, they're 5 times more likely to refer you, and some of the studies actually suggest this could be higher. So you want your customers to feel good about you and being at your home, and so that their families and even them, they'll go out and they'll recommend you to others, because you know how important word of mouth is. And those of you that are in sales and marketing, you know the importance of a referral and how that conversation affects the reputation. And so Sasser, who's from Harvard, Dr. Sasser, points out that there's a minor effect between behavior that the companies want to see in their customers and their employees. And what he says is, we want to retain our employees just as we want to retain our customers. We want a large share of our employees' energy just as we want a large share of our customers' wallets. And we want our employees to refer us to others just as we want our customers to refer us to others. And so again, it's a great thing to think about spending time on your employees first. And if you look at someone such as, next slide if we could, such as Disney. Do we have a next? There we go. Disney looks at, again, their financial results and repeat business. They don't start there. They start and understand that it's their guest satisfaction that drives that. And it's the team member experience that drives guest satisfaction. And again, it starts with that leadership excellence, which is you. So one of the best, a great, again, resource that I've found and have done a lot of training around is called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and it's by Patrick Lencioni. And in your notes there, I've given you a few things that you can go online. There's a YouTube clip that you can watch Patrick, and there's also a PDF that will give you a summary of the book. So if you get the book, there's also a field guide, and if you can, I would recommend that you get both of them, because the book is excellent. It's a real easy to read. It's a fable, and it's got a lot of great tips and ideas, as well as the field guide to support it. But one of the things that it has, which is really good if you can do this, is a team assessment. It's on page 192 of the book, and you can do this individually to really look at your own team's functioning, and you can even do it as a team and have everyone participate. So it's a good tool. But let me take you through just quickly what he talks about. Obviously, we need attention to results, and that's our top line. He said, but you are not going to get results until you kind of have this build, and the first foundational piece is trust. And you have to have trust, and if you don't, in the absence of trust, then you don't do conflict well. And some of you are thinking, Lori, why would we even want conflict? Well, conflict done well is actually a positive thing. So when your team members are having a conversation and they can have some pushback or give you a different perspective, or challenge you on something and maybe some of the thinking, you really get a good perspective when you're making decisions. And when you have conflict that's done in a positive way, it really helps decisions. And one of the things that conflict also does is it helps with commitment, because one thing that we all know is we want to be heard. So we might not always agree, but we at least want to be heard and have input. And when we don't, we're not committed to the decision. And if we're not committed to the decision, then we're not necessarily accountable either, or able to hold each other accountable. And if there's no accountability, then we have an inattention to results. So one of the things that Patrick says is how important it is to start out with trust. And it's interesting because when we look at a number of different resources, trust always seems to come back. So let's spend a little time talking about trust. So what are some ways that you can build trust with your team? Well, actually, there's a couple other questions I think we can all consider and think about. And the first one is, how do you build trust as a leader? And then the second one is, how do you build a trusting team so that the trust happens within them? And one thing that I'll leave with you to think about is what would happen if you focused on building trust with your team and you put this as a lot of energy into this and really making sure that this foundational piece happens, because it's realizing the importance of having the trust and what happens, the consequences when it doesn't. And if you obsessively go after this and set some goals around it and you find it important, you'll see that, it can make a big difference with your team. So here's a few things that I have found have worked, and love for you to share these in the chat room. So if you've got other things that work, others would love to learn from you. But the first one is really get to know each other. When you're with your team, make sure you spend time with them, getting to know them on a personal level. You'll find that when you do, they're more productive. If they know that you genuinely care about them as a leader and that you have their best interests in mind. I was just recently on a team. I was actually on a board with a number of members, and one particular member, I'll call him Jack for our purposes, drove me absolutely crazy. We disagreed on most things, I would say, and you know what? He was opinionated, he was direct, and I just really had a hard time dealing with Jack. And Jack and I both end up at a conference together. And we only knew each other at this conference. So one night when everybody was on their own for dinner, we felt we needed to obviously go out. I think Jack felt the same way about me. We thought, well, let's have a really quick dinner. But here the two of us are sitting and no one else is there. So we had to have a conversation with each other. And over dinner, we learned about each other's lives, about families. We found things in common, that we both love to travel. And I really learned why Jack was on the board, and some really heart-touching reasons. And I love watching behaviors and how things change. And one thing that I know that happened shortly after was the next board meeting Jack and I were at. He came and he sat right beside me. And I thought, wow, because normally we're at opposite ends of the table. And then we had conversation. And then Jack actually asked me some questions, and I asked him questions back. And I thought, wow, is this so unusual? But one of the things that I thought was most interesting was at the end of that meeting, I thought, gee, Jack is talking different to me. It's more respectful, and I really listened to what he said. And then I realized and had to question myself, did he really speak differently, or was I listening differently? And I strongly believe it's because the two of us took the time to get to know each other and built that relationship. So how can you get to know your team members? Here's a great assignment that I'll often do with managers. And you can do this with your own team, or you can even do this at a manager's role with other departments, is take a period of time, whether it's weekly or bi-weekly or monthly, and make a list of other managers and who you don't know very well, and make some time to go and speak with them, just a half an hour coffee. And in your conversation, you can ask them, what can I do better to help you in your role? How can I help you succeed? Or how can our team help you succeed? What can we do to work better together? And some of the comments and the feedback from teams that I've worked with that have actually put this into place for a long term have had amazing results. It's helped pull down silos. It's helped them to rely on each other better, as well as improve processes. So certainly get to know your own team, but also take this outside your team. Do something fun together as well. Here's a quick exercise that you can do with your team. I do this in training, and again, if it doesn't make sense and I'll just overview it quickly, please feel free to contact me directly. But I call it little known facts. And what your team would do is they'd record 5 things about themselves that are true that no one else on the team knows about them. And the goal is to stump everyone. Now, you can do this in different ways. You can extend it over a period of time, or you could do this in a team meeting. And what you would do is you would read some of the things that your team member said. And if the team gets it right, whoever it is gets a point. And if you stump them, you get 5 points. And at the end, you can add up the points for something fun like a chocolate bar or box of chocolates or something like that. The things that teens get to know each other about have been amazing. I mean, we hear things about people who are relatives to royalty, to rock and roll stars, people who have played sports, even people who wanted to be ballerinas or doctors or things. It's just really interesting when you find out some of those fun things about your staff. So little known facts is something that you can use. Another thing is, and I know that retirement homes always get back to the community. So as a team, it's going out and doing something fun together. It can certainly be bowling or going to the show or those types of things, or do something where you can do an act of kindness. This one team that I worked with, they did a Habitat for Humanity build. So a group of them actually did the build, but then there was another organization that came in and they served lunch to those that were building. So, I mean, you could do either one. You could do a build, or you could be one who, brought sandwiches and salads and served them to the team or to another team that's already at the build. This was just an example of a lunch table where everyone at the build had an opportunity to sign it and send good messages to the family. So developing your team, certainly doing some fun things, getting to know each other, and then it can also be in your team meetings. And going back to your team meetings, certainly, they might be about talking about changes or updates and tasks, but take time to get to know each other. And you can do things where you ask your teams some questions, some pointed questions about perhaps what are some ways that we can improve our teamwork. Now, if you have a couple people in your team and you ask that question, you might get some really good responses. If you have a whole group, sometimes there can be silence. And what you can do is pair people up, have them work on it, and then come back and as a big team, brainstorm some of those ideas on a flip chart or a whiteboard, and then decide and prioritize what are some things that you can put into place. And your role as a leader is to make sure that there's resources, or again to make sure that everyone's agreeing to them, and some of these things happen. You might even have some team building sessions. You know, one of the things that I love doing with groups is celebrating strengths, and there's a number of different tools, personality tools like Myers-Briggs type indicator, personality dimensions, SDI, DISC, and there's a lot of these that you can do online now, and just be creative and have fun and find out a little bit about each other. One team that I worked with, they got together and they brainstormed the characteristics of a high-performing team. And everybody was involved, and they listed all of the different things, and you can see them all listed on their board. And what they would do is every week, they would pick a different one, and they would focus on it. And they would actually measure themselves individually and measure themselves on a team. And over the course of time, they celebrated their success because they were really implementing all of them. You know, you see something like laugh. So that week you would come in and you would see jokes being sent around, and you would hear someone that was responsible for making sure the whole team laughed once every hour, because we know that a team that's laughing and is having fun is actually, you know, more productive and more positive, and that rolls over to your customer experience. So that's one thing a team did. Patrick Lencioni says the most important action that a leader must take to encourage the building of trust on a team is to demonstrate vulnerability first. So as a leader, you go first. Here is a great exercise that he talks about in his book, and I have done this numerous times with different teams, and I will tell you it's very effective. If you do this with your team, you might want to make sure that there's a quiet environment, and you go first. First two questions are easy. Where did you grow up? How many siblings do you have? And where do they fall in order? And the third question is the one that I will tell you connects to the heart. What is the most difficult, important, or unique challenge of your childhood of being a kid? I have witnessed, I can't tell you how many leaders around the table, when they've shared some of these things, I've seen men and women cry, and the rest of the team cry right along with them. So I'm not saying that, you know, you have to worry about crying, but it just gets to such an emotional level that people really connect at that point. One of the managers that I was speaking with, he did this with a team of other managers, but he decided that, and he had quite a big group himself, he decided he was going back and putting all of his supervisors and frontline team through this because it had such a big impact on him. So this is a great, again, exercise to be able to accelerate your trust on your team. And again, you go first. I like this quote that Abraham Lincoln says, "I do not like this person, but I must get to know him better." One thing, again, a great exercise to do with your team is focus on team builders and team killers. And I've got a few good ideas. If you want information, please give me a call. I appreciate is an excellent way of focusing in on the positives. There's so many times when we have coworkers, we look at things that aren't going right, but this focuses everybody in on, when we're focusing on what's not going right, on the negatives, this makes us focus on the positives, on the strengths of the individuals. So what you can do is get everyone fills out an envelope, and you can hang these envelopes all along the wall. You can decorate them if you want, and have a bunch of I appreciation notes. And again, depending on your team, you might want to manage this a little bit differently. One of the teams that I worked with, it was quite a large team, so they had them in groups of 5, and you were responsible for writing an I appreciation note for all members of your team. And you kind of remember and remind them that Valentine's Day, if you remember when you were a kid and you were the only person that didn't get a Valentine's in your Valentine's box, how bad that felt. So you want to make sure that everyone writes one for every member of the team, and throughout the day they can put them, or throughout the week, whatever period, put them in their envelopes. And once they finish their team, certainly write one for everyone. So encourage everyone to write one for everyone. But you want to make sure that they they focus on their own team first. And rather than just, I appreciate you're a nice person, put something specific, maybe something someone did, or a way that they affect teamwork, just something, again, that's unique and special and different and cool. And I will tell you, when people open up their envelopes, it makes everyone smile, and it really has a big impact on the team. So it's, again, something fun that you can do together. Another thing is team norms. This is an exercise, and actually these are team norms from a group I worked at. But as a team, you can decide and talk about and brainstorm, what do we need from each other in order to be effective, and what do we need in order to work together as a team. And the team comes up and they brainstorm all of these ideas, and then they kind of weed through them and determine which are the most important. This team here picked 19 of them. They had a big long list, but you can have a shorter list also. This team also decided that they really wanted to explain some of the points, and you'll see that they got really specific in their points. And then what we did is, after this, every single person, we went around the table and everyone agreed to it, so they committed to it, and then they also signed their team norms. But what's important is you can have this great document written down and everybody signs it, but if no one does it, it's sort of that waste of the time. So you need to find ways to keep it alive. This particular team, they took each one of those team norms and they focused on one a month. And it was something that, again, you see here on the wall, treat and communicate with respect. And so everyone was required to come back into that team meeting and talk about ways that they did this. And that was their way of keeping it alive. And, I appreciated someone on the chat box already talking about this, but as a leader, create trust by rolling up your sleeves. I remember one of my best managers, I wanted a day off of work and no one could cover for me, and my manager went in and covered for me, and she didn't even know my job. But if you can just imagine what it did for me, I was forever loyal to her. I would have done anything for this manager. And not only that, is she built relationships to every single other person that was on that team at that point. They saw that she really wanted to support us and would have done anything. Now, I'm not suggesting that you have to, work 7 days a week to fill in, but what would it be like if you were able to roll up your sleeves and go and help? And some of the other, oftentimes when I'm doing surveys with Frontline, they say, my manager has no idea what I go through. But what a better way of saying, yeah, I do, than by actually going and filling in and seeing what it's like. So is there a way that maybe you can go and work side by side, or help out, or do something maybe that you wouldn't normally do? So rolling up your sleeve and helping each other out. So just as a summary, we're looking at trust is the foundation of a cohesive team. On a team, trust is about vulnerability, and you going first and you showing your vulnerability. Building trust takes time, but the process can be accelerated through exercises like we just talked about. And like a good relationship, trust must be maintained over time. Just as I'm finishing up, some of you might be saying, Lori, this is so simple and this is so easy. And I want to say, yes, it is so simple and so easy, and it takes time. And you might say, well, this is fluffy stuff. We have work to do. We've got to get the tasks done. And I want to say, absolutely, you do have work to do, and you need to get tasks done, and this does take time. But the caution is, if you don't take time to do it, the amount of time that it takes to deal with a team that's not functioning as a team can also really take over. So these are simple things that, when you put into practice, really make a big difference with your team. So why don't people do what they're supposed to do? Well, first thing is, they're not sure what they're supposed to do. Sometimes we haven't taken the time to really explain what roles are and what the expectations are. And then they might not be sure why they should be doing it. And that why is a key piece when we're talking about our team. A lot of times we think, gosh, that seems absolutely obvious, but sometimes we need to connect the dots for our team members. They don't know how to do it. this can be scary. It can be scary when you've got team members that maybe have been working in the role for a number of years, and then how do they come and say to you, I don't really know how to do this. So they don't know how. Or they might feel their way is better, or they might think something else is more important, and maybe they believe they are doing it. This happened to me once. I remember being new in a position, and I thought I was doing a really good job, and no one told me I wasn't, and I found out from someone else. So that can be really tough on a team member. Here's another one. There are obstacles beyond their control, resources, scheduling, things that, again, that they have no control over. And the final one is sometimes there's no negative consequences for poor performance. This quote comes from Encouraging from the Heart, and it says, if you see yourself as a caring leader, you act differently than when you see yourself as a controller. As you take on the role of caring leader, people soon begin relating to you differently. They get the message that you're not out looking for ways to catch them screwing up, but instead you're looking for the opposite. So your role is really creating that supportive climate where people are much more likely to help each other succeed. And it starts with you. And you've heard this from the very first session, is really leadership is about caring and starting from the heart. And it's about making sure that your team members are successful. So we're going to work through these 8 different components of team performance. So the first one is setting clear expectations. Alan Williams once said, we seldom take time to show people what we need, but we're disappointed when they don't deliver. And isn't that true? You know, have you sat down and really let your team know what your goals are and how they fit into those, and what their roles are and what the expectations are, how well they're doing, what the standards are? You know, a lot of times we even say things like, well, provide over and above customer service. Well, what does that mean, over and above customer service? And what are the resources that are available and the authority that's needed? And then, as we talked about in the very first session, how important why is. And so what is the impact on them, on the team, on the residents, on what they're doing and their roles and their expectations, so that there's no ambiguity and everything is perfectly clear. And as you're aware, some team members need more clarity than others, so it's really getting to know your team member and finding out what they need. And part of this also, and I'm just going to give you a really high-level overview of SMART goals. You've probably heard SMART goals. This is called SMARTest goals. I like this because it's team-based. It comes from a book from Jack Canfield and Peter Chi, and it's called Coaching and Breakthrough Success. And if you actually Google him, you'll find, and I'm sorry I didn't put it on here, but you'll actually find a PDF of the book of the very first chapter, and it gives you some really good information. But he talks about SMARTest goals as far as being specific and measurable, attainable, and relevant, time-bound. And then, you know, things like engaging and satisfying and team-based. These are, don't make your goals too challenging. Make them, and especially when you're starting out for your team, make them simple. Make them something that everyone's interested in and that they're going to be successful in achieving, so that you can celebrate them. Because the more celebrations and the smaller goals that are reached, you can build up to the bigger ones. But again, making sure that you set them and helping everyone know where you're going. You can set great team goals. You can set goals around trust. You can set goals around communication. Whatever it is, make them simple and specific and measurable, time-bound, relevant, and then again, the engaging, satisfied, and team-based. So it's your SMART goals. I had a chance to listen to Rudy Giuliani, and you know, I don't want to talk politics because it's not, it doesn't go there, but one of the things that I really liked about Rudy was how he talked about 911. I mean, you must admit what an incredible leader he was during that time. And one thing that he said was, prior to 911, I call it PEP. He talked about how important it was to plan, empower, and practice. And so under the planning phase, he said, you know, you could never plan for 911. How could they possibly? But what they did was planned for things that might come up, plan for things that might go wrong, plan for the unknown, and then based on some of those situations, empower their team. So then empower the team to know how to handle it. Planning what happens when somebody, when we're short-staffed, or what happens when a resident does this, or what happens when this occurs. And then empowering your team how to handle and how to execute that plan. And then finally practicing that plan. And you can practice in so many different ways. You can certainly practice on the job. You can do some conversation and discussion and role play. Great ideas, and again, how important it is to do that. And he said that was one of the biggest game changers for him. So as a leader, it's pepping your team. And then also along with that is feedback. Goals plus feedback keep us engaged. There's a really interesting study that happened with soldiers that I want to share with you. They went under several weeks of crazy training where they were competing for places in a special unit that they were all wanting to be part of. And at the end of the training that everyone had together, there was one final challenge that remained, and they all needed to compete in this in full gear. They were all motivated. They were really, all of them, excellent at what they did, and they knew that they had to do this in order to get into the special unit. So for this march, the soldiers were divided into 4 groups, and during the march, there'd be no communication whatsoever between the groups, and each group would march 20 kilometers, that's 12.5 miles, over the exact same terrain on the same day. The only variation was the verbal instructions that the group received. So group number 1, the first group of soldiers, they were told exactly the distance they'd be marching, 20 kilometers, and they were regularly informed of the progress along the way. Group number 2 were only told that it would be a long march. They were given no feedback, no contact through their march at all. Group number 3, they were told they'd be marching 15 kilometers instead of 20, and after marching 14, they were told they'd have 6 more to go. Group number 4, they were told that they would march 25 kilometers instead of 20, and after marching 14, they were told they had 6 more to go. So as you listen to those, kind of think about which one do you think did the best and suffered the least from stress during the march, and which group did the worst and suffered the most. And you probably all guessed that group 1 performed the best. So knowing how far they were going and getting regular reports were key to them achieving the highest rates. And you probably also suspected that group number 2 performed the worst. Knowing that, knowing that it would be a long march and then getting no feedback absolutely yield poor results for them. Group number 3 actually placed second, and group number 4 placed third. And there's lots of reasons why in the study. But the other thing that I think is really interesting is they measured stress levels, and group number 1 actually had less stress levels, so things like cortisol, and group number 2 had the highest. And if you think about that in the workplace, how important is it for us when we're working towards goals that we know where we are and that we get constant feedback? I have a chance to work a lot with the younger generation, and I've done a lot of research with them, and one thing that I hear repeatedly is how important feedback is to them, and they love positive feedback, and they say if we get negative feedback, we certainly want it delivered in a positive way. So getting feedback is very important. And then it's about paying attention. As a leader, paying attention to what people are doing right, being available, being visible. We talked about those in the first session, and checking in with your team. So important just to sit down and get their input, find out if they need help, and take care of things quickly. You can just have a quick conversation every so often that says, how are you on a personal level? How's the team doing? And how can I support you? And then remove obstacles. So supporting your team is getting the job done. I remember hearing some managers say, don't bring me in problems unless you have a solution. Well, I'm sorry to say, sometimes as an employee, we can't even come up with the solution. So taking that responsibility and helping certainly your team members brainstorm some ways around will help, but also some things are out of their control. There's a famous study called the iceberg of ignorance, and this is really alarming. What it concluded was only 4% of an organization's frontline problems are known by top management. 4%. 9% are known by middle management, 74% by supervisors, and of course 100% by employees. So what that means for you as a manager is sometimes your employees are dealing with things and they don't come to you for a variety of reasons. One, they might not think you're going to fix it, or two, they don't want to complain. But having that open door conversation helps you, and it also helps you to be able to get input from them. One of the things that we know from research is top motivators, full appreciation of a job well done, a feeling of being in on things, and interesting work. So get their input. And here's something that a lot of us aren't comfortable with. Encourage pushback. Don't be the leader that says, do as I say, and just expect everyone to do as you say. Encourage them to come up with ideas or different options, or the opportunity to say, hey, I don't think this is going to work, because you're going to get a better end product, but you'll also hear more from them. Ask them what's going right, and make sure you spend time on that positive piece. What is going right? What are the gaps? What should we start doing? What should we stop doing? And what should we continue to do? So hold these brainstorming sessions with your team and get them involved, and make sure good ideas don't fall through the cracks, because that's something that we hear. And number 4 is impactful praise and recognition. I will tell you, praise and recognition is the lifeblood of an organization, and especially during times of change. I'm going to do a quick poll with you. Terry's going to bring this up, and I want you to think about this question. When you get recognition, does it help you perform at a higher level? Got that up, Terry? And so if you could answer yes or no, when you get recognition, does it help you perform at a higher level? So what do we have? Oh, we're still voting. Interesting. We're seeing lots of yeses. Still coming in. We're at 71%. Thank you for keep voting here. We're at a 95% still. So as you're voting, that's okay. Right now we're at 96% says yes. So interesting. One of big studies that was done asked the question, do I need encouragement to perform my best? And only 60% said yes. And the researchers couldn't figure this out because they knew that people needed encouragement. But when they changed the question to, when you get recognition, does it help you perform at a higher level? 98% said yes. As a manager, this is a key thing for you to know, because we know that a lot of times people are starved for recognition. So again, that whole praise and recognition. Actually, I'm going to go back one slide there, Terry. One thing that I'd like you to think about when you're giving praise and recognition is make sure that it's specific. Tell your team how they met the goal or the value of what they've done. Explain the impact to the company, to the residents, to the team itself, and make sure you give it and express appreciation. A lot of times, thank you is good, but being very specific makes a difference. I hear managers that say things like, you really made a difference by, or I'm impressed by, or what an effective way to. So rather than just a thank you, be specific. And then keep your team in the loop. Updates, let them know when there's changes. Give them new information. Again, feedback and results. And if you can really give them results, that's something that they're going to want to hear. And as a new leader in a team, it's also coaching them, coaching to train, coaching to praise, to adjust performance, and to reach the highest potential. And I know in the future when Orca's looking at new webinars and different things, these are things that will be a focus of theirs in the future. This is also part of holding your team accountable. Do you have scoreboards? Do you have goals that are listed and people can see how well they're doing? Do you have curious conversations when things aren't going right, rather than just jumping in and either avoiding it or saying, hey, something as simple as, hey, what's going on and how can I help? What's getting in your way? Making sure that your standard operating procedures are there and that they are continuing to be improved. Here's a quick tip with dealing with resistance. I just want to go through this, and again, I'd be happy to share more information, but here's how it might go. Let's say your team, for example, you want them to do something and they're too busy to do it. So that's something that happens often in teams. When we ask someone to do something, they say, I'm too busy. And a lot of times as a manager, we want to help them out, or we end up doing it for them or finding the solutions. But this is a really cool technique that really works, and it takes some practice doing it. So the first point is finding 3 positives, I call it, or an empathy statement, or 3 really important things about them, and then reminding them of the outcome, and then asking for a specific solution. So for example, somebody who might be too busy, the 3 positive things that I might say is, you're absolutely right. It is a busy time. You guys are short-staffed and you have an awful lot to do. You've really been working hard, and I know you take your job seriously and you want to do a good job. So that was actually 4. But if you can add 3 and make sure that it's 3, not 1 or 2, and have them be real and genuine, it lets that staff member know that you get them. So you start out with that, and then you go back to, I really need you to do X. So again, you're too busy. You've been working really hard. I know that. I know that you're short-staffed, and I know you take your job seriously and want to do a good job. You really need to do X, and here's the clincher. What do you need to do to get that job done? And that's really important. It's not what can I do to help you get that job done, or it's what do you need to do to get that job done? Because you've set it up with the positives, and then you've let them know what they need to do, what happens with that question is they start to brainstorm their own solutions. And they may say to you, well, you know what, I need some extra help, or I need some extra time, or whatever it is. But they start to do their own brainstorming. So again, it's a really good technique to try it. Give it a try. It might take a few times, especially to come up with those positives. And then part of your role also as a coach is dealing with conflict. You know, when we look at Tuckman's model for team development, there's 4 different processes that team go through. The first one is forming, then storming, norming, and performing. And all teams will go through forming, where you're getting to know each other. Storming is often where you might get the disagreements or drama might happen. Norming is when we start to be able to perform all around that. And performing is the optimal. It's where everything seems to be working and flowing well. So recognize that in order to get to that performing, you need to go through and experience those others and help people get through it. Jim Collins, in his book Good to Great, he talks about getting the right people on the bus in the right seats. And you've probably noticed this when you're dealing with conflict between 2 employees. You know, sometimes one employee isn't quite the right fit and they leave the team, and just the team works itself out. Or somebody new coming into the team can have a great impact on the team. So it's dealing with that conflict and taking care of it right away. It's also dealing with things like team killers, conflict, gossip, and rather than thinking, oh, it'll work out, it's so beneficial as a leader if you can, again, you know, I've noticed this is happening, this is the impact, this is what I need to happen, and how will you ensure that it doesn't continue. The 7th one is reinforcing the standards. So you've got, whether it's standards of service, standards of care, reviewing the standards, and then picking one at a time. Focus on it so well that everyone is bringing their level up on that standard. And then do that through providing that feedback where you're at, having people rate themselves and do self-assessments, and then providing great stories of success that reinforce all of those standards. Look at how do we continuously improve, and then make sure that you're building in celebration. A key factor, again, is how do you celebrate, which is our last point, is celebrating success. People want to have fun in work. They want to have fun activities as a team, get to know each other, and this kind of wraps up everything when we look at that celebration together. There's a recognition expert. Her name is Sarah McVannell. She's a good friend of mine. She's wrote 2 books, and they're listed here for you. I asked her the question, what's the #1 thing new leaders can do to build a strong team? And what she said is listen and ask questions with the intention to understand and help people find their own answers. We show respect and retain our top talent when we help people tap into their own greatness and hold the faith for them in the moment when they don't see it in themselves. Sarah has given some great ideas in her book, some hands-on examples that you can use. I've got a couple here that if you would like to email me, I'd be more than happy to share them with you. And they're just some fun things that you can do with your team. So just as we wrap up, I want you to think, we've talked a lot about a number of different things. Some are easy, some take time, but you can really look at building the trust with your team, setting up the examples, paying attention, getting input, impactful praise and recognition, keeping people in the loop, developing your coaching, reinforcing, and celebrating. So just as we wrap up, we've got a few minutes that I'd love to hear any questions you might have. You can certainly put them into the question box, or if someone would like to raise their hand and go on the microphone and we can hear you as well, if there's any questions. We'll just see what anyone has to say. Do you have a question? Oh, Darlene, can you tell us what your question is? Darlene, do we need to unmute Terry? You're unmuted, Darlene. And we don't hear you. Darlene, is it possible to put your question in the question box then? Sorry about that. If you wouldn't mind, if you can type it in and we'll, is it down? Coming up, okay. As I said, I'm so thankful that I have Terry sitting next to me, and we don't see it here. No? Okay. Sorry about that. Darlene, you are more than welcome to email me your question. I'd be happy to answer it for you directly. Again, my information is on the back page. And I just want to remind you that I love success stories. I love if you could share anything with me that works, because we can all help each other out and be successful. I take the information seriously, and I make sure that I'm always improving and sharing your ideas with others. Also, if there's anything that you found was missing that you expected, please let me know. Email me. My information's at the back, and I'd love to have any sort of conversation with you that you'd like. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Terry. And again, Terry, thank you so much for your technical expertise today.
Thanks very much, Lori, for that great presentation. The information was very valuable to our members. Again, if anybody has any questions, you can raise your hand in the control panel or type it into the question box, and we can get Lori to answer any that you have. If not, I hope everybody remembers to download the handouts for the presentation. They're in the handouts section, again, in the control panel, as well as the evaluation form. If you could download that and fill it in and fax it back to us or email, that would be much appreciated. So again, we'll just check one more time to see if anybody has any questions. Doesn't look like it. So thanks very much for your time, everybody, and have a great rest of the afternoon. Take care.